Well, let us see now. This may be working after all. Nihil desperandum. That was our school motto.
Was it?
Folks, Rainbow Radio is having an interview with Jocelyn Chaplin and her book Deep Equality.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to go through it, and we're going to see how Jocelyn reacts to what I ask her. So we start off with the idea of flow. And you say, involvement of flow rather than happiness makes for excellence in life. That somewhat surprised me. Happiness, I would have thought, is such a high goal. What is it that flow is extra?
Well, I think actually happiness has become a almost packaged goal for people in this present consumerist society, that we're almost taught to want happiness, so therefore we buy this or buy that in order to get happy. And happy becomes superior to sadness, for example, whereas the human reality is to be sometimes happy and sometimes sad, and sometimes different feelings are very important other than to be always happy.
Do you really enjoy sadness?
Well, again, enjoyment what it's about. When I talk about flow, it's about being tuned in to what is really in the moment, appropriate, so that you feel it's a different kind of joy. I think maybe I make a difference between happiness and joy. There's a kind of joy which is not excitement, not just bubbling over with happiness, but it's a deep sense that you're attuned to whoever you're with, to whatever the circumstances around you are, in a way that is really deeply appropriate. Like the core of you is connecting to what's going on. So if you are witnessing a tragedy, it's not appropriate to start laughing. I mean, in certain circumstances it might be, but usually the appropriate feeling is a sorrow and a sadness. So if you're always striving for happiness, it means that you're not actually attuning to the reality of the world that you're in. If that makes sense.
Okay. So then you go on to 7 states of one's self-consciousness. So you've got unconcerned with others' opinions is number 2. And again, I'm thinking to myself, why does somebody write a book if they are unconcerned with people's opinions?
Well, I guess I'm wanting to write a book to share what I've been given, essentially. So sharing is just being myself. It's like being a flower. You open your petals, and so I'm just sharing my ideas. And I, first of all, got very upset. I used to get very upset if people didn't like my book or rejected it or ignored it. But gradually, as I've grown and changed, I haven't actually minded so much, because it's about ego when you really care too much about what people think. So when you're in the flow, you're attuning to something that is above or below the everyday kind of, I suppose you might call it praise or people liking you. It's on another kind of level. It's very hard. I wouldn't say for a minute that I'm totally there, but I'm working on it. It's a work in progress to care less and less and less about other people's opinions.
Okay, we've got 7 ones here. Mm-hmm. The one that I think suddenly leaps itself at me: intuitively attuned to the deepest needs of now. So how would you feel that you arrive at the deepest needs of this moment?
Okay, well, I felt when we started, when you came in just now, that it was a really important need for us to sit for a few minutes with a candle and just be present with each other. And that felt to me, doesn't mean I'm always right, but when I'm tuned in, I often do get a sense of what is appropriate in that moment. And it felt that the need of that moment was for us to sit still for a little while before embarking on the interview, for an example.
I see.
But you know, it could be something different depending on what's going on.
So, if it's not to the deepest, what happens to one? Then one is in a state of confusion or flux?
Very often. Or we're very much reacting to other people and reacting to what's going on, often from our own defences, from our own anxieties and fears.
Well, in view of the next, number 7, opposite states flow into each other organically rather than competitively. So, if, you know, the opposite of being, shall we say, in the flow at this moment is kind of equally valid for a particular moment than being in the flow, where do opposite states help to synthesize or complement one another?
Again, let me think of an example. I guess you're asking me whether there's the opposite to being in the flow and whether that's valuable. Is that partly what you're saying?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Is that what you are saying then?
No, I think when you're in the flow, it's like the opposite state might be to be very joyful, let's say, very happy, and that lasts for a while. It may last for hours or days even, but that, as I said earlier, there might be the opposite of that, which is sorrow, might be appropriate. And you don't sort of fight the sorrow. You don't say, oh, I mustn't be sad, I've got to be happy all the time. You go with it, you let it happen. In the same way that the seasons turn very organically into each other. So there's a season, it says that in the Bible and in many places, you know, there's a season for spring when things are all growing and starting out. And then there's a season for things dying in the autumn when the leaves fall off the trees. I mean, and to be able to feel that neither one is better than the other, and they don't have to fight each other. They flow into each other.
True. But people use the same image being different for different effects. For example, your next line, the next line I've got here, is the balance between control and surrender. And then you use the image of being able to walk through empty streets without being, any less interested than if there's something beautiful in that street that you can...
Well, the thing is that when you're in control, I think the example I gave was having a map. You're walking through these streets and you say to yourself, I've got to turn left here, right there, whether it's an old-fashioned print map or a sat-nav, you're following. You're kind of in control, or somebody's in control. Whereas if you are surrendering to the flow, to, I might say, to the goddess, to Equalia, to the flow, you are listening to your intuition that she is speaking to. So when you come to a crossroads, instead of saying, I've got to turn left, you wait for her to tell you whether it's going to be left or right, and then you just follow where your intuition leads you. In the kind of French situationist movement, they used to call it a derive, where you wander through the streets just following your instinct, where it takes you. And
Derive, not Derrida.
No, but Derrida probably would have liked that, yes. Yeah. It's trusting the flow, that it will lead you to where you need to be.
Yes. Well, equalizing rhythms is the repeating pattern of energy flow between opposites over time, is one of your sentences.
It is, yes.
How might you understand
expand.
that?
Well, of course, it happens on many different levels and in many different dimensions. So at the very simplest, it could be simply the positive and negative electrons and protons in the subatomic level, where you've got, over time, you've got the interplay of electrons and protons, the protons being, if you like, positive and the electrons being negative. So in the magnetic forces of nature, you've got these negative and positive electrical states creating through their tension the energy of whatever creates matter, really, basically. As William Blake said, no progression without contraries. So on a very sort of physical and basic level, these forces actually create change and energy. But when it comes to like our own lives, we could say that the in and out breath alone is like an organic in and an organic out. Oh, I should have turned that off. An organic in and an organic out, because if you breathe in for too long, just go on and on breathing in, well, you wouldn't last very long. You'd be dead within minutes.
Possibly, but you do know that in breathing, there is breathing in and then maintaining and then breathing out. That could be what helps the balance. And you know that the yogic breath is 1-4-2.
Yes. I think I'm talking in a much more general sense about breath rather than using those fantastic yogic techniques, which are really good. But that on the whole, most of us, through most of our lives, most of our daily experience, breathe in and then we breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. And we can do it in different ways, but there has to be an out breath sooner or later for most of us, and there also has to be an in breath sooner or later, and that's an organic flow between the opposites of in and out.
I see.
As an example.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, now you talk about here low self-esteem, but also looking down on others stops us empathizing. Now, of course, I agree with each of those, kind of opposites. But then you go on to, this is a very interesting sentence to me, lowering one's omnipotent dreams of being perfect and saving the world. Now, do women have that as much as men, or is this been, the messianic longing is a male preserve?
No, I don't think it's a male preserve at all. It's just that in the past, I suppose, because men have been seen as so superior for 5,000 years, that most human beings who've had that particular sense of omnipotence have been men. But I think more recently, particularly over the last 100, 200 years, as the balance is getting a little bit, slightly more even between male and female.
So did that happen historically? You talk about the earlier time when things were more equal, and then hierarchies took over with male patronising religions. But wouldn't it be true that in a practical society where the most important thing is simply surviving of a day, that if the male felt they were doing, more important tasks, sure they, I don't know how that, I'm using that word correctly, but if they did think that, it would be natural, without being too bombastic, that they thought we are superior.
Well, there's many ways of looking at this, but in many of the earlier cultures before the patriarchy completely took over, one of the most important things, which was seen as superior to almost any other act, was giving birth to babies, creating new life. So many of the cities that have been excavated were built over mounds, or mounds were built that represented the pregnant belly of the woman. So what would happen would be that the female would be prioritised over many other things, so long as there was an attitude in the society that this was very important. Because what is important is a social construct. And in some society, today, for example, what is important is making lots of money. What is important is things like science and building and being a banker, or all kinds of writing great novels. The kind of things that are important today are often things that are associated with the masculine. But that is a social construct, and that hasn't always been the case.
So does that mean it's going to change, or just slightly needs altering? How does it seem as a definite negativity?
Well, for me personally, I hope it will change really deeply, because I feel we've got to change in our mental constructs around what we see as important in life. And that the way we're going at the moment, with sort of capitalism just going on and on and on, cannot continue, or we won't survive as a species. The hierarchical thinking, which also puts men above women, but it also puts, mind, body, and all kinds of things above others, is going to end up with us probably as a human race ending, because we can't go on like this. So there needs to be a fundamental, very deep change that away from hierarchies into a much more fluid, horizontal way of thinking, where you've got, okay, men on here, you can be different, women can be different, although lots of people now are playing with the ideas and living the ideas of flexibility in gender, but that basically wherever there have been rigid binaries or rigid opposites, where one is above the other, that leads to domination over nature, domination over women, and leads to the terrible situation we're in globally at the moment. Domination of one culture over another too.
But to me, it's as though today, with the Westerners being very influenced by Hollywood, you have this idea in Hollywood movies, if they talk about historical events, because feminism is so much stronger than when I was a child. I was a male chauvinist because I didn't know any different when I was.
Of course, yeah.
And having seen the changes and seen kind of historical reproductions of events that may have been different because the men were crushing the women, we now feel that it wasn't so bad. So, but you think that we reached a stage where it was never better. It was always getting worse, is it?
No, I would say that the big change came about 5,000 years ago. I would say that before that, we had far more egalitarian societies. Right. But for 5,000 years, we started off with Sargon in what's now modern-day Iraq, in Mesopotamia, beginning to conquer lands for the sake of conquering lands. We began to have warrior gods being in charge rather than mother goddesses of the earth. And from then on, we had, places like Egypt, we had Sumer and Babylon, and various civilizations developed which were very hierarchical and became more and more male dominated, so that by the time you get to for example 1000 BC, most of the sort of built up world has become patriarchal by then, so that's gone on for a long time, but it has been a lot better before that. I see. That's what my understanding, and archaeologists many archaeologists have conferred that was the case.
See, I did history in a different way, so I don't know much about as you do. So the remainder of the chapter, you talk about the neurotic inner rebel and the wise inner rebel, sort of going from one to the other, but both have their, sort of evolutionary progress. And then we want us to be rid of vertical structures. And then you say, obviously this is of interest to me, like gurus. And a time when feeling at the top and bottom of hierarchies and how it felt. You ask that in your exercises. At the end of each chapter, you give people things they might like to do. And you say that people should imagine that they're at the top of a hierarchy and then at the bottom, and what they would feel like.
Or how they have actually experienced that in their lives. I mean, would that be helpful for you to say, or shall I say, or should we both say what experiences we've had of being at the top of hierarchies and at the bottom of hierarchies?
If you like.
Do you want to say anything? And would that be helpful? I mean,
I told you that the question of messianic longings is a very great interest to me, because I admit as a Jew that at times I have, the feeling that I am messianic, that I am a messianic being. And, there is evidence, not just wild conjecture, that like the chosen people, the guru of mine, whom I call Shiva, the avatar of Shiva, chose me to be, because the family would disintegrate. He had done it that way as the destroyer. And then I would help to reunite it. So, and he gave me 2 boons, by the way, which is written about in mythology. Shiva giving the warrior prince boons. So anyway, that was when he did that to me. That was when I felt at the top, right? But at times it's really hurt because I can't quite see it happening in any, certainly not like him, in any effective way. And at the bottom is maybe because there's an innate arrogance which I don't see. I get rejected. I was thrown out, for example, although that did me good in the end, I was thrown out of his ashram. But you say, oh, in fact, it was the best thing that could have happened.
Was it? Yeah.
Because we were reunited one-on-one. And I was the first one to have him to myself for a week as a companion. We went to others, but so it didn't harm me in the least. And but when it's happened at other times, you know, I really have. I mean, even happened in our common place where we met, the gym. That various people started to reject me, and I don't like it, of course.
Not, no.
And I feel very much sometimes inferior that they're probably right in something or other. But I have to carry on the game as I see it. So that's how, when I feel at the top, I question whether I'm capable of, you know. And when I reach the bottom, I don't quite believe that it will remain that way, that I'll find a way out of it anyway. And tell myself that it's good for me, in the end, to have gone through this humbling experience.
Yes, I think that's really important. It's like in Taoism, they say what is high will be low and what is low will be high.
Right.
And that as kind of souls on a journey, I feel we all need the experience of being both high, if you like, and low. And particularly if we feel very high, we need the experience of being very low. You know, it's good to sort of integrate the opposites within us.
Right.
But just to go back to the idea of a guru, I do feel that the time is now coming towards spirituality that is not about gurus.
I know, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
The thing is, he would not have used about himself, for example, if he was a guru. I mean, he actually specified, he said, I'm not a guru.
Right.
They are gurus, right?
Okay.
He is Shiva. He's
Yes,
not a guru.
yeah.
The guru brings you to the foot of the knowledge. If he's a good guru and he has, right, and you were lit up by one another, he brings you to the foot of the knowledge, and then you're on your own.
Great. I mean, that's a good
In our
use
case
of it.
with the Shiva thing, it was as though there was a real destiny of events. It wasn't just what happened to me or something. We were going to take part in some massive, you know, events for humankind.
I guess the word guru really means teacher, doesn't it? And we all have both experience of being teachers and being taught. So I guess what I'm sort of concerned about is when one person becomes on too high a pedestal for too many others.
Yes,
that's really the problem. It doesn't mean,
yes.
it doesn't mean that we don't teach and learn all the time. We can be on a train one day and meet somebody maybe just for a few minutes or a few hours and learn so much from them and never see them again, and they're our teacher.
I was lucky again, you see, because having him as this unexpected, had been thrown out of his ashram, suddenly we flung together for a whole week as companion. It was more or less like being with you right now. He didn't go into the big trips with me. We did when we went into the crowds and he spoke to them. And so it was just like being with, you know, a friend.
Lovely. More equal, really.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's what's so important, isn't it?
And I never had to do the others, try to chase him, you know, to be near him when he was walking along the road or anything like that, because I knew it would happen at the right time.
Yes.
And, you know.
So you were trusting the flow. In fact, you were, when you say the right time, that is trusting the flow, isn't it?
Yes. And I'd prepared for it. My whole trip in the 60s was trusting. We had no money. All our money was stolen the first time in the car, and the second time left England with my girlfriend with £5 between us.
Wow.
But I knew, because I trusted what had happened the first time, always, the same thing would happen, and it did.
So there's a big part of you that's actually very tuned in, I would say.
Has been at times, yes.
I mean, none of us, I think, are like that all the time, but, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I see someone like you, I think, she's much more, you know, going in the flow than you are right now. That's why I talked about possibly using you as a teacher, but as you said, unless we do feel more equal, it will be something unnatural anyway.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you were going to tell us something now.
Do you want to ask the next
I
question?
know, but you asked about feeling high and low. So I thought
Oh,
you were going to
yes,
tell us.
about my experiences, yes, absolutely. Well, I grew up, as I mentioned in the book, in colonial Africa. And of course, in that context, being white meant that one was seen as superior at that time, and so that I grew up with this feeling of we were the colonial power. And yet at school, I felt incredibly inferior. I went to a school that was almost entirely black. I felt incredibly inferior to the girls in my class who were slightly older than me, very confident, very beautiful. And so even within that one experience, I had the two feelings going on at once. But I mean, I guess all the time I'm very aware as I go through life that I'm very quick to look up to one person or look down on another, because it's like the water that we swim in. We're like fish in the water of hierarchy. But because I've been working at it for a long time, I tend to notice it and try to change. Because the world I would love to live in is a world where we really do see each other essentially as equal, where we listen properly to each other, we give each other energy, and we all have different roles, of course, but that ultimately no one's superior to anybody else.
Well, at times I would agree with you. At times I would say somebody is definitely superior. Like Shiva was kind of definitely superior to me, but in one way I actually not defeated him, but when I was kicked out of his ashram, not by him personally, but I was so angry with the injustice. Others mock. I said, as I went out the door, I said, he's not going to go to America. Millionaires, bought his ticket because something was going wrong. He said, he's not going to go to America before I see him again. 3 months later, thanks to a whole series of adventures which kept me in Kathmandu, he appears 1,000 miles away in Kathmandu alone. And it happened, I brought him to me, and he told me that time, said, you were right to resist me. I didn't even know I had. So,
but it's interesting that when there is a hierarchy, there's likely also to be a battle going on, isn't there? A power struggle.
yes.
And that's the almost inevitable offshoot of hierarchy, to have battles.
Well, yes, battle certainly. There was definitely, well, I'm not going to talk about me now. So, let's go to chapter 2. Ladders into Snakes. Yes, interesting title. So, you say that the hijab and being worn by these young girls in the West and so on is a kind of resistance to Western superiority. So, I find it hard to like it, although I'm not going to resist, I'm not going to say to somebody, grab it off or something, but having seen in Muslim countries where they're forced to wear various things and so on, I'm a bit infuriated that we here, most of us who are tolerant, can't say to them, look, it doesn't help much in certain situations. I've got a burqa woman living right above us, it's just stuck in her room all day, it seemed. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, as a feminist, of course, I'm very concerned about women being treated as inferior in any culture. And of course, there are degrees of awful, appalling treatment in different countries. But the thing about this equalising process that we're all engaged in to some extent is that there are different kinds of inequalities, and some of them are across countries and across cultures. And there's a kind of a rage in the, let's say the Muslim world, or we could say, or even the non-West world, really started with colonialism and later slavery and all these things, about the appalling treatment and superiority of Westerners, the Western culture, the Western ways of doing things, the Western languages over, and religions too, of course, Christianity charged around South America and all sorts of places, doing the most appalling things, feeling that we Christians are superior. And that there's a backlash to this.
Of course.
Okay,
Go on.
yeah, we're going ahead now. Well, I think anybody talking about something being in the blood of anybody else is problematic, because that's already giving a stereotype or giving something as if it's not changeable. My whole book and my ideas and many people's ideas are about people being able to change, maybe have many identities, different identities at different times, and the idea of a rigid identity that's in your blood. And people will say, oh, well, gender is is something completely biological. Well, nowadays people are even questioning that. So you can't say that things are in people's blood without having the old hierarchical concept. And I think you also used the word evolution, which I think can be problematic, because that can also imply that there is an inferior that is growing into a superior. When you use the word when anybody uses the word evolution.
In cross-referencing, all I want to see, this is the messianic bottom, is everyone happy in the world.
Course,
and then I won't, have anything to say, we'll all be dancing together.
No, but meanwhile, we want to explore, don't we? What our own, explore our own prejudices, our own words, our own models, and I'm just noticing that in the blood is a kind of problematic concept, because you can't all be happy and equal unless we explore where we're not. None of us, including me, I've got all these hierarchies I was brought up with that I've tried to dissolve and work with, but of course they're going to be there, and I'm just going to be noticing them. I'm not, I don't know anybody who's completely free. And freedom is the word. We want to be free from the prisons of our hierarchies.
Okay, well, it's as though you're punching me in a way.
Sorry.
Okay.
Now that's so maybe the fact that I was concerned about that particular expression felt like I was attacking you a bit. Did it?
Came through as a powerful thing as to something I've said, which kind of is disturbing.
Yes, in the blood. Somebody's got something in the blood.
I can see that you were.
Yeah, I am disturbed by that. Yeah.
So we are obsessed by blood. We choose. That's why it gained into things like the blood libel, that we were, doing these things and so on in connection with blood, and I want that to end. Of course I do, but we don't even. If we live a certain life, we never see much blood. We just see it occasionally in funny moments.
Except women do bleed every month, so women do see a lot of blood.
Yes, again, I should say.
No, that's not at all. No, not at all. No, I'm not thinking about you being stupid for one moment.
I do. I can enjoy my stupidity. I've often felt that I've done far better with my foolishness than I've ever done trying to be an intellectual.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
What's the final bit of the chapter? Which is stronger desire? Closeness of fear, of intimacy? Yes, that's right.
I mean, it is interesting how that in all these alternative organisations and events, whether you're talking about the Occupy movement or when Fraser did Megatripolis back in the day, there are usually, or they're very often, people who, for one reason or another, their confidence, their class background, their personality, take leadership roles, and sometimes they have to. I think there's a place for a leadership role.
Yes.
So,
in
but
a male,
it can
if he's
come,
doing the more glittering, I surrender to him, and he does. I do what he wants.
The problem is that of course when that becomes rigid, and you find that the same one person is always leading.
I never really suffered my relationship with Fraser, although we had one or two disagreements, but because he was, he was doing better things to be around, even if it wasn't successful, right, and there would be recrimination going on, it was still more interesting and, doing things than anything else that anybody else had to offer. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah, go on, 50 years.
That...